Latvia Weekly, your independent guide to the news in Latvia, with your hosts Otto and Joe Horgan. Latvia and esam, and welcome to episode number 85 of the Latvia Weekly podcast, which is a very accurate number because 85 is about the temperature it is right now here in Jelgava if you are a user of the Fahrenheit system. And I am one of your hosts, Joe Horgan. Seated across from me is Otto, who is also melting in the heat right now. Otto, how are you?
Hello everyone, exactly, you're right, it almost feels like 85 centigrade, so this must be one of the hottest time in the year in Latvia.
Yeah. Well, that's a little bit of an exaggeration because I think we'd probably both be dead already at 85 centigrade, which is another reason why I like Fahrenheit better, but we will not get into that again. That's an argument that we have over and over and over again. But we will be using centigrade because we're just going to start out with the weather because it's again the thing that everyone's talking about. Here in Jelgava, where we are currently sitting here on my balcony on Sunday afternoon, it's 28 degrees today, low of 16 at night. We're going to see some thunderstorms today, tomorrow, the next day, and pretty much the entire week. There's going to be a big chance of thunderstorms in the afternoon. Monday, it's going to be 26 degrees, 15 during the night. Tuesday, 22 degrees, is going to be a little bit cloudier. Wednesday, 20 degrees. Thursday, 23. Friday, 23. Saturday, 24. Sunday, 24. Monday, 23. Tuesday, 24. So it's going to be pretty nice and warm the entire week. A little bit less oppressively hot than it is today. And pretty much the same thing every day. Pretty good chance of rain in the afternoon or thunderstorms. So very good time for travel. Now, for those of you who were listening last week, you might have noticed that there was one story that we did not cover that you were probably waiting for, because every week for the last few months, we have been talking about the COVID-19 situation here in Latvia. And that was not a mistake. We didn't just forget this story, because the COVID-19 situation here in Latvia is pretty much non-existent at this point. So last night here in Latvia, there was one new case of COVID-19 that was reported here in the morning. And you might be thinking, well, that's just because there's not a lot of tests. Well, there was more than 1,000 tests that were done. I think it was 1,024, if I am not mistaken. So it's not just that we're not testing. That's 1 out of 1,000, basically, which is a pretty good situation to be in, considering how the rest of the world is right now. So although a lot of people aren't going to be traveling to other parts of Europe, the great thing about Latvia is that there are plenty of wonderful travel options. So that is why Otto and I have put together, we haven't actually really put together, we are going to do very quickly at the beginning of the show, 7 different wonders of Latvia off the top of our head that you can go and visit if you are lucky enough to be here in Latvia and not somewhere else in the world that is still suffering from the COVID situation a lot more seriously than we are. And these are all places that are pretty easy to get to. Especially if you have a car, but you can get to most of these by train or bus as well. So, Otto, let's start out. Where is the number one place that people should go to here in Latvia if they want to have a good time in the summer?
That would be, at least in my case, as this was also a discovery for me this year, that would be Jūrkalne, which is a place in western Latvia, in Kurzeme, by the sea, approximately in the middle between Liepāja and Ventspils, and it is one of the most exciting sights you can see, as you have not only the wonderful Baltic Sea, but also the tallest sand dune in Latvia, being approximately 30 meters. So a little bit like the sight you could see when you take the ferry and arrive to England, you can get in this part of the world in Latvia, in Jūrkalne.
And so what we're going to do is, Otto's going to mention a place, I'm going to mention a place. We haven't checked these with each other ahead of time. So I've made a little list of a few places. So if Otto takes one of mine, then I'll do another one. So number 2. Yeah, exactly. So number 2, I'm going to go a little bit further south from Jūrkalne, and there's a little town called Pāvilosta. Some of you know this very well, but a lot of you have never heard of this little town before. And if you are looking for an amazing seaside place here in Latvia, that is the number one one that I can recommend, because there is, first of all, it's a beautiful little town. Like, it really feels, I'm from Maine in the United States, and it really feels like one of these kind of small fishing villages that we have all over the state. But there's also, some nice places to stay there. There's a lot of nice guest houses, and there's one very good kind of little diner. It's like it really feels like and I don't know, I think maybe one of the reasons why I like Pavlosta so much is just because it feels a lot like home for me. So I don't know if that's the same for everyone, but anyone I know who has stayed in Pavlosta has loved it. So that is my first recommendation. Otto, what's your next recommendation?
I would take our listeners to another part of Latvia completely. That would be specifically the bends of Daugava, so a part of the Daugava River between Daugavpils and Krāslava, which is also quite a unique feat of geography, which is also very beautiful and impressive. Not only the two wonderful cities that have enough of historical heritage to enjoy yourself if you're a fan of architecture, but also for the fans of nature and very pristine environment, these bends and the forests and the valley of Daugava River at that location is probably also one of the most beautiful river sites in this country.
So now we've covered both the extreme west of the country and the extreme east of the country. I'm going to cover now the extreme middle of the country, or pretty close to the middle. It's still more in the west a little bit. Now, when we think of national parks here in Latvia, the one that comes to mind most often is Gauja National Park, which is, if you've been to the cities of Sigulda or Cēsis or Valmiera, then you've been to Gauja National Park, basically, because it's a huge territory between along the Gauja Valley in that region, and between the two main roads. But there is another national park that gets far less attention, far less recognition, but I would argue is not only just as majestic, but I would argue even more majestic than Gauja National Park, and that is Cemru National Park, or Cemri, or for those of you who have seen a map, it looks like Kemeri or Kemeri or something like that. And this is situated at the very extreme west of Jormala, which is this very long town. And so there's a few different things there. The most famous part of the national park is this amazing peat bog, which if you were unlucky enough to watch the Namias Ring movie, then you have seen it because they use that as a filming location. But really, it is the one part of Latvia that feels, I would say, the most unique when it comes to the nature, because I love that Gauja National Park, but you can see a lot of that nature in a lot of other places as well. The peat bogs here in the Baltics are really something else, and just the way that there's these little trees and these little pools and these little lakes, and you're just walking through, you really feel like you're on another planet. But that's not all. There's so much more in Cemri National Park to see. There are amazing beaches along the coast with little fish huts where you can buy some amazing, delicious fish. There's a lot of other lakes. There's a lot of bike trails. There's so much stuff to do in Cemri National Park. And the added bonus is that not only can you get there by train, and there's a bike rental place right at the train station, but it is a like an hour drive from Riga, not even, if traffic is good. So skip Jormala, skip Gauja National Park. Well, go to Gauja National Park, but do go to Cemri as well. So what is your next recommendation, Otto, or your last recommendation, or second to last? Because we have one final recommendation, which I think you guys can already guess that we'll do together. But what's your last individual recommendation?
Well, at this time of year, I would recommend to visit the Rundale Palace, and I would perhaps not include it in this list on most other shows, as that's probably already very well known and would not need additional advertising. But specifically at this time of the year, I would like to recommend it for the Rose Garden rather than just the architectural pleasures that it would provide, as this is the time when the roses are blooming, and they have reconstructed not only the palace, which went on for 50 years, but also have done a great job with the garden. So at this time, I would recommend you to visit that as well.
And on your way to Rundale Palace, if you're going from Riga, there's a little town that you're going to pass through, most likely, if you're going if you're not going through Jelgava, if you're going the closest way or the fastest way, and that is a town called Bauska. And I have a lot of friends or people I know who were on their way to Rundale, and they stopped in Bauska for a bit, And they just stayed in Bauska the entire day because Bauska is awesome. First of all, Bauska has a really cool castle itself, which has just been very nicely renovated. When I first came to Latvia 7 years ago, they were just kind of starting the renovation process. It is now fully renovated. It is awesome. It is a very charming little town. And a little bit different from, like the Kuldiga, the Tsasis, those kinds of towns as well. So, very cool town, Bauska, you can visit. And also, not only, can you visit Bauska on your way to Rundala National Park, but it's on the Via Baltica. So, if you are visiting our sister republic of Lithuania down to the south, which is also a kind of a COVID-safe zone as well now, thankfully, then you can also stop in Bauska on the way there. And you should. It's a nice place to get some lunch at the very least. So, Otto, are you ready for our final number 7 recommendation that we can recommend together? It's very close to our hearts.
Of course, that is our own city of Jelgava.
Exactly, because Jelgava, although, when you talk to some of your colleagues, they might go like, well, why in the world did you go to Jelgava? Well, that's because they haven't been here in a while. A lot of people haven't been to Jelgava in a while. There's so much awesome stuff to do here in Jelgava. We have wild horses on the island. We have this awesome new park in the middle of the Liulupe River, where there is a really cool outdoor concert hall where there's going to be amazing concerts all summer because it's outdoors, so we can actually have, COVID-free, hopefully, concerts. There's great trails to walk around on. The city has a lot of great restaurants to eat at, and we have some amazing architecture. We have the biggest palace, I think, in the Baltics, but I think definitely in Latvia. We also
Baltics, yes.
Yeah. So you can check out your little Rundal is just like a mini, summer.
That's the Rundal is the summer house. The main house is the one in Jelgava.
Exactly. So, the inside isn't so grand because it's just the university, but it is really cool outside. So there's tons to do in Jelgava, and if you're interested in visiting Jelgava, you can also message me, and I can give you some more ideas. But summer is long, thankfully, and we will give each week another new recommendation of where you can visit. But now it is time to get into some of the other news stories of the week. And just to wrap up with the COVID kind of strain, the kind of strain of thought that I started with COVID, again, there's a lot of different theories as to why Latvia was not hit as hard with COVID as in other places. Some people are saying that, maybe it's just because we, locked down quicker than in other places. Maybe it's just because Latvians are not as close with each other, with smooching, hello and goodbye as in other countries as well. Maybe the strain that just happened to come here to Latvia of COVID that was, just wasn't as contagious as other places. I don't want to be the pessimist, but I've got a very bad feeling that we just kind of got lucky with a number of factors, because there are a lot of other places in the world that started out kind of lucky, like, we have been so far, and then they got hit harder at a later date. So I still have a bad feeling that this is not the end of it here in Latvia. I hope it is. I hope that we, that we rode out the storm, and that's, the worst it's going to be. But I'm not buying it quite so yet. So we are cautiously optimistic right now, or I guess I'm cautiously pessimistic. But probably, I don't think this is the last that we'll be talking about COVID on the show, seeing how it's gone in the rest of the world. So. Anyway, Otto, we do have quite a few other stories to talk about, or not a whole lot, because again, Latvia's kind of on vacation right now. So we talked about the heat records that have been broken. This is a story that I am not. I don't even want to talk about this because I hate snakes. I really, really don't like snakes. I was talking about this with my wife a couple of days ago. I have a of both snakes and mice. I have a what's the term? An irrational fear of them. My wife doesn't like insects so much. I really don't like snakes and mice. So I especially don't like poisonous snakes, which unfortunately we do have some in Latvia. And
actually, we do have only one. Well, there are a few of them, but there's only one sort of snakes in Latvia that is venomous. So in that regard, we are doing better than Australia. And here we can salute our occasional friend in argument and in show, Chris Ackenfeld.
Yes, of course. Chris Ockenfeld's our correspondent down in Cambodia right now, who grew up in Australia and somehow survived. I don't understand how, but So apparently 5 people have been bitten by vipers over the last week.
Well, I think here the news goes together with the heat record issue because as it is not a idiomatic expression to say that snakes are cold-blooded animals, meaning that their activity depends on the temperature, and the higher the temperature, the more active they are. And so when we have heat records that have been broken, such as the 50-year heat record in Ruijena and Stende, no wonder that snakes have become more active. And also it is the case that many people were out of town celebrating midsummer, celebrating Jāņi, and so they had more chances than usual to get in touch with snakes, and apparently this is what has happened, and is something that we have to be careful about while the weather remains as hot as it is right now.
This is a stupid question because I should know this at this point. What parts of Latvia have the most poisonous snakes? Because I don't think that they're quite so common here in Jelgava. But do you know which parts of Latvia have it most commonly? Is it like up in like Vidzeme?
Well, they do prefer locations such as bushes, or for example, where you would have a bunch of logs, or for example these some old leaves where you have a heap of them. Like they may prefer to live there. So probably they are more common in more forested areas, such as in Kurzeme and in Vidzeme. At the same time, you can also find them in Jelgava. You can also find them in places where you have intensive agriculture, and so you would have a lot of these like heaps and the different kinds of things together in a bunch, where the snakes could use it as an abode. At the same time, they may also use, let's say, some openings in the foundation of buildings to try to stay there. So when you go to your summer house, or when you go to a summer house of your friends, just be careful, and the main thing, do not try to walk over them, or do not take them by their tails. They will bite, and you don't want to test whether it is or is not this venomous snake. Yeah, and as we can read in the information from the Nature Museum, the vipers have a very characteristic zigzag line on their back, and their heads are more triangular than other snakes. Also, if you have the chance to look them in their eyes, then one other unique characteristic is that the pupil of their eyes are vertical instead of other snakes whose eyes are pupils of their eyes are round.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear this right now as Otto is talking. So snakes are terrible. I hate snakes. But one thing that's as annoying as snakes is I was always thinking when I left Riga, because I lived in Čengaregs, which is a pretty noisy part of Riga. I always thought Jelgava would be a lot quieter. The ones that just went by weren't quite so loud, but all times of night you hear these obnoxiously loud, where they just like take the mufflers off or something, these little motorbikes, and they're not even like really motorcycles, or like scooters, or because kids use them. I think what's the age you have to be to drive one of these? Is it 16?
16, maybe even 14. Well, 16 for sure.
But they're just so loud, and so these ones weren't quite so bad, but still, I don't know how everyone doesn't have hearing damage, so and sometimes they're even so loud they even set off the car alarms that go by. So then it's even worse, because then first of all that wakes up your kid, and then your kid can't go back to sleep because then the car alarm's off, and then the dogs start yelling and everything, and it's just like ugh. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be that kind of guy who just complains all the time about a place they moved to, and I wouldn't change the laws about it, but seriously, just get a muffler for your motorbike.
Oh, I agree. Like on behalf of militant pedestrians, I hope that they ban them.
Yeah. Oh, I see. There's one right there. Yeah. Oh, jeez. Okay. Anyway, moving on. So another issue which has been pretty poisonous here over the last couple of, quite a while now, and this is an issue that comes up in campaigns over and over and over again, and something that doesn't really change very often. This is an issue that became one on the front burner. It's been on the back. It's always on the back burner. It's it's like that crock pot with that's been cooking for God knows how long. it is now on the front burner again because the court has found it unconstitutional. This was the Constitutional Court, wasn't it?
Exactly, because we have the Constitutional Court, or the Satversmes tiesa, which is the only part of the judicial system that could make decisions on whether any law is done or is according to the Constitution.
And they found that the guaranteed minimum income is unconstitutionally low at just 64 euros a month, which is something around the lines of like $80 a month, which, yeah, that is very, very, very low. Now, again, this gets confused quite a bit with minimum wage. Okay, so minimum wage and guaranteed minimum income are two different things. And I'm going to be very lazy and leave it to Otto to explain the difference.
So, of course, the minimum wage is much higher than that. It is approximately 430 euros, if I'm not wrong. At least the last time I checked, it was like that. And in response to this decision of the Constitutional Court, the Ministry of Welfare has argued that it would be possible to raise this guaranteed minimal income to 109 euros. Whereas they could also support raising minimum salary to 500 euros. And here the difference as in between the two terms would be that the minimum wage is the minimum amount of money before taxes which may be paid for a load of work. Single load of work, whereas this guaranteed minimal income, as I understand, is the money that is not taxed, meaning that the income level that is not taxed. And I think they also use this in calculating the minimum amount of pensions and other benefits. And probably one of the issues why it was found unconstitutional was that the formula and the particular variables that they used it to calculate it dated back to early 90s, which was the time when many of these new arrangements were found after we regained our independence.
Things were probably a little bit cheaper back then as well.
Oh, exactly. Of course, that was before we were in the European Union, before we were part of the world economy. And of course, the necessities, what we understand as this basic minimum basket of goods is also different like back then as it is right now.
So what do you see happening right now? So the Ministry of Welfare is run by the KPVLV party. So that is the big flashy populist party that came into power in the last election and now does not look to be doing so well right now. Do you think that they are going to make this a major issue? Because that is one thing, that was one of their major promises, to do something about minimum wage finally after all of these years. How aggressive do you think they're going to push this? And Ms. Petrovic, the minister, is she going to make a big fuss about this in the way that some of Jauna Conservative Party's ministers have done about their pet issues in the last year and a half?
I think that certainly she would try, not only because it would be in her interest for people to forget this Constitutional Court decision and the possible blame that she may be assigned. But also the question of trying to take the flag out of the hands of the Conservative Party, which has been very vocal about both the issues of the minimum wage, but also about the issue of this level of income that is not taxed. And probably for the Conservative Party, the more important part of this has been raising the level of income which is not taxed, which also, in my opinion, may be a better way, at least certainly with regard to competitiveness of our economy, and also for the long-term benefit of the business people, because of course you cannot just set a minimum salary and expect that everyone will be willing to pay it. We have already heard about different types of schemes and trying to avoid this. For example, after giving people less than like one full load of work, so that they would be able to employ them within the same means, because by increasing the minimum wage, that doesn't automatically increase the income of the business people. So I think that this will be something that the KPV will push, and will try to get the limelight away from the Conservative Party for sure.
And there's an issue we'll cover in more detail once we, have some kind of clear policy from the ministry, because there's a lot to unpack, and there's a lot of discussions to have about, whether or not or how high the minimum wage should be raised, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Another, I wouldn't quite say toxic issue, but definitely a thorny issue that has been talked about for the last couple of years, and is something that is starting to, I don't know, necessarily pick up steam, but at least, at least among, for example, my younger students, there's definitely kind of a new way of thought about this. There's definitely, some kind of change happening. And this is the issue of same-sex partners here in Latvia. Now, we're not even talking about same-sex marriage. Same-sex marriage, that is, seems a little bit further away, because the Constitution was amended just a few years ago. It was when I was still here in Latvia, saying specifically that marriage is between one man and one woman. But the idea of a same-sex partnership, which would have a lot of the same rights. This was a stepping stone in America and a lot of other countries. It's a stepping stone that's taking place in Estonia right now towards, something more like, actual traditional recognized marriage by the state for same-sex couples. Well, there was a new initiative on the Monabals LV portal. So if there are 10,000 signatures on this online portal, like, it's like my vote, then it has to be discussed in front of Saima. Now, although this new Saima and the parties that are in this new Saima, there seems to be more support than there would have been in previous Saimas for this issue. It doesn't seem like there's really going to be much change this time around. What do you think about this, Otto?
Certainly, this issue has been raised to a more prominent level in this parliament, and that happened already before this particular event, because as we discussed this in one of the previous shows long time ago, this is actually one of the issues that are included in the coalition agreement, specifically that the coalition parties are able to vote as they wish on a number of issues, including the issue of the regulation of same-sex partnerships. And that was one of the points that Attīstībai par, the Development for party, managed to get in the coalition agreement. So it has been on the political agenda since 2018. At the same time, this is now a particular law proposal that has gone towards the parliament, so it will be reviewed by the commission, probably the judicial commission, and then it will with the recommendation of the commission, it may go to the voting in the parliament, and we may expect Attīstībai par, or the Development for, voting for this, and then it will be interesting to see which way the other parties will choose, because we can clearly see some parties which would be against it. We know also individual members of parliament who would be against it, as they would be considered, and they have announced themselves as more conservative in the values that they prefer, but certainly it will not go away, and I would expect if it's not enacted in this political cycle, it will still remain an issue in the next 4 years.
Okay, couple other stories before we hand things over to Mr. Ārzemnieks to do the international issues. One is that the illegal cigarette sales, which have been endemic around Riga Central Market, the amount of sales has decreased, but it is still an issue. And this was interesting because a couple months ago, we were talking about the tearing down of the different kiosks near the trolley bus stop, which is kind of the the end of the central market. It's close to where the central station is, and I was not very happy about this. Most people seemed totally fine with this, but the issue, the reason why they tore down all of these little kiosks, and this is a lot of you visited the central market before, know what I'm talking about. This is where people sold clothes and different, there were some flea markets in there and like video games, but it was mostly clothes. For me, this was kind of the most interesting part of the market. This is where a lot of real people really did, actual, sales of different things. It wasn't, so nice and cutesy and, well put together as the rest of the market, which is now becoming a little bit of a tourist attraction, and I think is losing a bit of its edge. But in general, people seem to be in favor of this. The reason why they were torn down is because of the illegal cigarette issue. And just as I predicted, it has not gone away. It's just been pushed off to the side a little bit. So I don't know. Any thoughts about this, Otto?
Well, specifically in the central market, it seems that, albeit controversial, the change worked because, with all due respect to the people who were selling their products legitimately, some of these shops, quite a few, did serve as front establishments for actually selling cigarettes, and the planning of the place also did not allow good enough oversight. Now the specific area of Central Market is actually practically free from these illicit activities, and now they are I have seen a little bit of that going on, but indeed, like, this change has pushed it, as I mentioned before, to the tunnel between the central market and the central station, which is no longer the property of the central market, so the Central Market Security Service has no authority to go there. At the same time, there does not seem to be enough action from the Riga Municipal Police to deal with it at that tunnel. At the same time, the people who are doing this have now become more clandestine in their activities, as occasionally one may observe that.
Yeah, and again, I mean, if the goal, sure, that's great. They push the illegal cigarette sales out of the market, but they haven't stopped anything when it comes to illegal cigarette sales, because the taxes are still very, very high. Which I think is something that Otto and I can agree on, is that until they lower the taxes on cigarettes, nothing is going to change with this issue. But again, whether or not it's good that there's high cigarette taxes, that's a whole different issue that we can have, because there's obviously pros and cons. One little minor story I just want to mention very quickly. So for those of you who are fans of space, you have something to be excited about, because Latvia has been accepted as an official member state of the European Space Agency, which is very, very cool, because now Latvia is going to have a higher budget to work with for its scientists. So shout out to Miss Amara Grops, who I know is very, very excited about this issue. Who is an excellent space researcher here in Latvia, doing excellent work. So there's going to be more cooperation with Latvian scientists and more opportunity for grants and different things like that. So very good accomplishment for Latvia when it comes to space. And we're still not shooting off probes into space, but hey, it's something. So anyway, should we hand things over to Olavs now?
Exactly.
Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda refused to attend a planned meeting with his Estonian and Latvian counterparts on Thursday, saying he did so after the countries failed to agree to ban electricity purchases from a new nuclear power plant in Belarus. Lithuania seized the nuclear power plant built by Russia's Atomstroy export near its capital and financed by Moscow with a 10 billion loan as threat to its safety and national security. Lithuania wants all the three countries to sign up a banning sales to Belarusian electricity after the nuclear plant comes online. Presidents of Estonia and Latvia said they still backed the preliminary agreement which they left of the governments to continue the discussions on exact wordings if it needs to be adjusted. Hopefully Latvia and Estonia will reach this single agreement with Lithuania having a unified position towards the Belarusian power plant. May I share Lithuanian president's position not attending this very important meeting in Estonia? Otto and Joe, do you share my sentiment?
Yeah, it's interesting that in regard to the meeting between the Baltic presidents, the issue of Belarus is still a big issue and probably will remain so. We have heard also the European voices getting involved in this, and it will be interesting how this goes on, especially that next year we will have the hockey championship that will be organized by both Latvia and Belarus, and whether the issue of some people in Belarus allegedly being behind the illegal cigarette sales, which of these issues will come up and how that will affect the ability for the Baltic states in getting a common voice in this regard, because that would be very important.
Radiation sensors in Stockholm have detected higher than usual but still harmless levels of isotopes produced by nuclear fission, probably from somewhere or on near the Baltic Sea. A body running a worldwide network of the sensors said on Friday. The Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization oversees a network of hundreds of monitoring stations that use seismic, hydroacoustic and other technology to check for a nuclear weapon test anywhere in the world. That technology can, however, be put to other uses as well. Radioactive particles that can be carried long distances by the wind, detecting usually high levels of two radionuclides earlier this week: cesium-134, 137, and ruthenium-143. These are certainly nuclear fission products, most likely from a civil source, a spokeswoman for the Vienna-based CTBTO said, referring to the atomic chain reaction that generates heat in a nuclear reactor. I think there is certainly something we should be worried about, and these are levels of radioactivity that officials are not in position to tell us about. Today, 1,015 passengers arrived in Riga on the first voyage of the Tallinn Group ship Silja Serenade. On its first voyage on the new temporary route from Helsinki, the ship went yesterday, June 26, picking up about 150 passengers, of whom 1,200 arrived in Riga for one day to return to Helsinki tonight, but about 300 choose to stay in Latvia to spend a longer here. This morning, the ship was greeted by Ansis Zeltiņš, the manager of Freeport of Riga. According to the information of the company's website, the ship leaves Riga from Helsinki at 16:30. The ship will leave Helsinki and Riga every second day, offering vacationers ample opportunities to plan both shorter one-day cruises and longer trips to Finland and Latvia this summer. Be sure that these ships are safe for travel.
And thank you very much, Olevs. Now, Otto, I know that you wanted to comment, so what would you like to mention?
I'm also very happy to hear the news about the Riga-Helsinki ferry route, because I'm looking forward to going to Helsinki myself. I have not been there yet, but I want to go, both for touristic reasons, but also that the Baltic Security Foundation that I work for, we are planning to have a conference there. So I think it would be a great location for that, and I'm happy that the transit is open again.
I think, I would also love to go to Helsinki as well on the ferry. I really hope that this becomes a more regular thing. But anyway, Otto, what do you have for the week in history? Because there's something very interesting. I can tie this in with a little final story that just came out today. So tell us about the week in history.
Let me remind our listeners to the Ligo Day of 1919, which was the June 23rd, 1919, when Estonian and Latvian armies won against German forces in the Battle of Cēsis, turning the tide of both Estonian and Latvian wars of independence by crushing the pro-German forces, and in the case of the Latvian army, paving the way to getting Bermonts back to Riga and outside of Latvia, and letting the Latvian army to focus all their forces to fighting the Red Army on the Eastern Front. And that is a major event for both of our countries. So here we can salute both our Latvia and also Estonia in this glorious fight for independence.
And in Cēsis itself, so apparently there was a 450-year-old inscription that was discovered in the castle. This was on the English version of LSM. I'm sure it's on the Latvian version of LSM as well, which is very, very cool. So this was discovered by one of the experts who works there. Apparently the light just shined a certain way through one of the cracks, and they noticed that there was this inscription that had never been noticed before. It was a coat of arms, and then also a few initials written around there as well, which is very, very cool. That this is obviously an object that has been scoured by archaeologists over and over and over again, and they still found something new, something interesting. Not quite as cool as like a hidden passage to like 450-year-old wine or something like that, but hey, definitely something cool to check out.
I think, unfortunately, the wine was blown up at the time when, during one of the sieges, the defenders found it untenable and blew the castle up. So one other example, as Cēsis, not only in 1919 but also before, was one of the key locations in Latvia, and also the witness to one of the many wars that we have unfortunately had. Thank goodness, not anymore.
Otto, so now that we again are open for now, and that it looks like we're able to go back to life as somewhat normal, at least temporarily, there are going to be all kinds of open air events throughout the country. So definitely, even here in Jelgava, we've got some great concerts coming up in the next week. So if you do come to Jelgava, you can go to the open air concert hall, where it's kind of open air. They built a big tent over it. It's a love-hate thing. You'll see it when you come here to Jelgava. I used to hate it. Now I think I'd miss it if it was gone. But the great thing is that in the time of COVID, at least we can have beautiful concerts and music. So anything you'd like to say to people before we sign off?
Enjoy the good weather. At the same time, do not forget sunscreen. Also look for something that has at least 30, number 30 on it. And of course, drink a lot of water, avoid heat strokes and avoid vipers. Enjoy it in a way so that you are not the only one who is very happy, but also the people that care for you are enjoying this too.
And don't forget to wash your hands. You still have to wash your hands, even though we don't have the high infection rates. So anyway, thank you guys so much. Thanks to Andrew and Carlos, who are still doing the awesome stories of the day every day on our Facebook page. You can subscribe there to keep updated all week. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And until next time, Visu labu visiem.
Visu labu.